The title of today's talk is Al Gore, Anthony Scaramucci, and me. I was originally going to call it Al Gore, Anthony Scaramucci, and Napoleon, but I may not have time to get to that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Anyway, around 2002, or maybe it was late 2001, I opened a video bar and cafe on the Lower East Side, which was not quite so hip as it is today. And on the Bowery, it was across the street from CBGB, which those punk rockers of you may be familiar with. Anyway, the idea was you could come in and it had video cameras and edit systems and screens, and you could buy a beer or a muffin or a coffee, and I only lost about $700,000 on it, but it was a good idea. Anyway, one day, this very big guy named Jamie Daves, a giant of a guy. For me, I'm only 5'6", everybody's a giant, but this guy was particularly big. He walks in and he starts asking me about television and video and what I do and stuff like that, and I give him the Gutenberg rap, which you've probably heard, and he goes off, and I figure that's the end of it. About 2 weeks later, he calls me back. He goes, "Hi, this is Jamie Daves. Maybe you remember me." Hard to forget. And he says, "I represent former Vice President Al Gore." Well, of course, this was 2001 or 2002, so Gore had pretty much just lost the election, or had it stolen from him, depending upon your perspective. And he says, "I represent former Vice President Al Gore, and the Vice President would like to meet with you." And I said, "That's great." And he said, "Do you have a private place that you can meet?" And I said, "Send him up to my house." At that time, I lived in a loft in Soho on Mercer Street before I got divorced and had to sell everything. So about 2 or 3 days later, I'm sitting in the loft, and the bell goes ding dong, and you know how many doormen, then you got this little video screen, and there in the little video screen is Al Gore, like he's on TV, except he's on my TV, and the only channel we got, which is, in-house TV, and I say, "Come on up." I'm thinking, he goes, I push the button, I go, "Hello," and he goes, "Al Gore." So I said, "Come on up." So I push the button, and the elevator opens, and there's Al Gore right there in my living room, and he's got a yellow pad and a pocket protector with a bunch of pens in it, and he sits down in my living room, and we have a cup of coffee or whatever. I think I had bagels. And he says, "I'm planning on starting a new TV channel. It's going to be about history or politics." And I said, "Al, you're making a big mistake, man, because there's a whole revolution going on now. People are making all their own stuff." This was even before YouTube. And I said, "That's what you ought to do the channel about." Well, one thing led to another, and then we launched this thing called Current TV, which you may have heard of. And okay, they threw me out because they didn't like my ideas particularly. I think they messed the thing up because they went Hollywood, but that's another story for another day. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you the story is that in this morning's New York Times, I read this piece about Anthony Scaramucci. You remember him. He was, for like 10 minutes, the Trump head of media or public affairs or whatever they call it, press office. And then he got thrown out after 5 days when that general came in. Anyway, there's a piece in the New York Times today on like page 12, and it says, "Anthony Scaramucci launches Scaramucci Post." Nobody knows what it is, but he wants to have a media company. So, of course, I sat down immediately, and I wrote him a letter. Now, this guy, for a guy in the media business, he's hard to get a hold of because he didn't even have the email address. So I wrote him a written letter. I printed it out, and I mailed it off to Sky Capital, which I suppose is his company that he runs. It's an investment company. It's just over here on Madison Avenue, a couple of blocks away. And, I said, essentially, here's what you should do, Mr. Scaramucci. I said, the television networks are done like it's still 1952. CNN's got 100 reporters and NBC's got 40 or 50 reporters, and they cost a fortune. You get cameramen and stuff like that. And it's really from a technology and more than that, an architecture from the 1950s. Meanwhile, there are 3.5 billion people in the world who have smartphones and iPhones, and each one of those smartphones and iPhones shoots video, edits, does graphics, does music, shares live streams like doing this, and it's all for free. There are 3.5 billion cameras in play now, 3.5 billion studios and networks and correspondents, and nobody is tapping into this thing. I said it's the Saudi Arabia of media, and you should tap into it, and I'll help you to do it, needless to say, and we can form the world's greatest network that involves everybody. And will the guy answer me or not? I don't have the vaguest idea. When we started Current TV, I think Al was also a little nervous about the idea, so I went on this university tour before Current was even launched. And I went to all these universities, and I said, "You don't need CNN, you don't need ABC, you got, in those days, a video camera, you didn't even have phones in those days. And I said, you can make your own stuff, and I don't know, to work or it didn't work." So after the university tour, Lisa and I went to the offices. Current TV had just launched. They had bought the old E-Trade building on the Embarcadero, and we're sitting there, and one day, this male mail truck pulls up, U.S. Postal Service truck pulls up, and did you ever see Miracle on 42nd Street? You know, the Santa Claus movie? And you know at the end when they're in the court, and they deliver the mail bags addressed to Santa Claus, and they just dump them out. That's what it was like. The trucks pulled up, and there was bag after bag after bag of people who said VHS tapes and DVDs. All these people wanted to make stuff, and they had no place to put it. So this was the potential of current TV, which they got nervous, and they went Hollywood, and they messed the thing up. So Anthony Scaramucci, if you see this video or you answer my letter, trust me, there are billions, literally billions of people who want to participate in a new kind of network, one that doesn't involve big movie stars, high salaries, studios, lights, and journalists from NBC or CNN or wherever, you know, kind of thing, the People's Network, not to be too communist sounding. So that's what I think you ought to do. And I think anybody who taps into this thing is going to make a fortune, but more than that, change the world of media. After all, Instagram is not done by professional photographers, it's done by us. And Facebook is done by us. And Twitter is done by us. But no television network is yet done by us. Television network's still done by them over there, the elite. So let's trash the elite and start our own program. Now, this brings me to Napoleon, which I want to get into for just a second. And if you read the VJ World today, I wrote a piece about this. You know, I go to Oxford University every summer to start summer school. I've been doing this for 5 years, European history. And this summer, we're studying Napoleon. So I'm reading Napoleon. Let me tell you something about Napoleon. He almost conquered the world, and from nowhere. I mean, from nothing. And the reason he did that was that up until Napoleon's time, every army in the world was a small, elite, professional, well-dressed, gold epaulets. I mean, you see these movies all the time, but very tiny. And what Napoleon did was he said, screw it, I'm going to draft every peasant and every farmer and every dentist, that they had them in those days, and they're all going to be in my army. So he raised this enormous, it's called the Grande Armée, this enormous army of 680,000 men. They didn't even, some of them didn't even speak, they didn't know left from right. So we used to train them by putting a piece of straw on one shoe and a piece of hay on the other one and taught them to march straw foot, hay foot, straw foot, hay foot. But the guy came within a hair's breadth of conquering the world. And he certainly united all of Europe. Why? Because he tapped into this enormous army of military. You know, that's how he made his army. Well, somebody with half a brain will tap into this army of videographers and people with phones who have something to say. Most people have something to say, but they're not allowed to do it. So, Anthony Scaramucci, if you're listening to me, call me. As I wrote in the letter, you give me 20 minutes and I will mess with your head in a way you can't imagine and change the way you think about media forever. But you got to call. So hopefully you'll see this, or one of your friends will, and together we can make a fortune. So, and change the world. And democratize video. Anyway, that's today's message. I hope you see it. And even if you, Anthony, don't, and anybody else who's interested in this, call me. It's there. It's waiting to be tapped into. I'll talk to you later.